Good morning, colleagues. Maybe we can start already because we are a bit late of time. So, good morning again. Today we are starting with the CTCN financial matters, which is agenda item 9.
in a second. So colleagues, welcome back after the coffee break. We are still on agenda item 8, the CTCN Program of Work, Annual Operating Plan and Budget for 2019. So we had before the coffee break, we had a discussion on the structure of the budget, and we will soon have a discussion from the CTCN team on the annual operating plan. But before we give the floor to Manfredi for his presentation, I think Didier wants to have the floor for some clarifications.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'd like to correct a statement I made. In a sense, the question was asked twice whether the 300,000 would increase or not the 57.7 million bottom line contribution to the CTCN. I said no. That after verification, I have to say yes. So please accept my apologies. And now the new figure should be around 58 million. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. With this, I would move the floor to Manfredi for his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to address this advisory board as, well, twice a year, every year since the beginning. Thanks. I don't have the clicker, so Scott, I'll just ask you to move ahead with the slide if you do not mind. So in the 2019 annual operating plan, we've been trying to link the COP mandate decisions, the guidance we have received from this board, the recommendations of the different reviews that we have undergone, and explain how the geographic approach will enhance the delivery of our core 3 services. We are using in this presentation the geographic approach. In the annual operating plan, we were using we were speaking about the regional approach, but following yesterday's discussion, we believe that it's better to shift to this other name. Also, we have very much based the annual operating plan on the program of work that provides an overall high-level vision for the CTCN until 2022, and the annual operating plan try to operationalize these in more detail, and also provide specific activities and target outputs, this time linked to the 3 core services, not the 3 level of engagements that the CTCN operates on, that are, as we have seen, national, regional, and global level. The annual operating plan takes in particular in consideration the results and the recommendations of the independent review performed by Ernst & Young on behalf of the parties, and then the different donor reviews, with in particular the one of Danida, that has been the latest that happened. And these focus mainly on monitoring and evaluation, reporting of impact. As such, we are working to modify and the technical assistant templates and reports to ensure that there are clearer links with the national planning processes and priorities at national and regional level, and also that there is a process to better and more consistently report on the impact that the technical assistants have had in the different countries. There is also we are also working on revising the reporting procedures to donors and to the advisory board, so that we hope is going to be easier for you to assess the timeliness and effectiveness of the actions that the CTCN undertakes. And finally, there is going to be attention and emphasis put on the result-based management, on linking the financial planning and reporting of the expected results. And this will be done mainly through increased staff capacity on this topic, and this also, I guess, tries to respond to the question raised by Canada and the US earlier about why the monitoring evaluation budget was not included, was not increased compared to last year, because this is going to be mainly done through an emphasized work done by staff that is already employed by the CTCN, and in particular by the technical assistant teams that again provides effectively the assistance to the developing countries. So next slides. This is a slide that is taken from the program of work, and just to show the three level once again of CTCN engagements. At the national level, we'll be mainly working in responding to technical assistance, but also in increasing the visibility and the operation, the ability to operate of national designated entities, also through the incubator program for least developing countries and small island development states. At the regional level, we'll be looking at identifying priority sectors that can provide more impact, again, at the regional level, also taking in consideration the priority sectors determined by the TEMS and the high-level champions to the COP. And then on the global level, there's going to be, on the one hand, feeding information and experience on needs and priorities of developing countries as those are expressed to the CTCN through the technical assistance, and then on the one hand, and emphasizing the global partnerships with the other mechanism under the convention, with a particular emphasis with the operating entities of the financial mechanisms and the capacity building mechanism. One is going to be defined, and of course taking in consideration the deliberation of parties for the technology framework. In terms of indicators for 2019, this is a list that you have received already in the document. I'm not going to go much in detail in it, but it's again it's divided along the three line of services that the CTCN has been mandated by the different COP decisions, and we believe it's in line with the ambition that we understand parties want us to have, and also the level of engagement that we have received, that we expect from developing countries in terms of services that they're going to ask us to provide to them. Let's then move to the budget for 2019. There are two slides. One is again the 2019 budget compared to the 2018 one. So the grand total is very similar. There is I think $100,000 more in this year. There is going to be a stronger emphasis on technical assistance compared to last year, I don't know if it's useful for me to go a little bit more in detail in the different budget categories, but the request coordination, refinement, and support is the work that the CTC, through the regional manager, the consultants, the consortium partners, and experts, do in reviewing the technical assistance requests that are submitted to the CTCN, and then preparing the so-called response plan to this request. It also includes resources that are used for developing GCF readiness proposal in line with the procedures of the Green Climate Fund. This has proven, as we have discussed in previous advisory board, more resource intensive than we could anticipate initially. So there is quite an amount of resources that are dedicated to these. Nevertheless, we're gonna have more resources available for technical assistance, including the fast technical assistance that we have presented last year to the advisory board. There is, given the new geographic structure, there is a little bit more of a resource use for outreach, networking, and stakeholder engagement. In particular, we're planning this year to have more tailored national and regional communication documents, strategies, and inputs that is going to increase slightly the cost. And then we're planning, as every year, to do the regional fora for national designated entities in the different regions, bringing not only the national designated entities, but also other stakeholders. We have heard yesterday about participation of network members that in some cases we need to support, and also national designated authorities under the GCF and the GEF operational focal point and national focal points. In terms of knowledge management, peer learning, and capacity building, there is a reduction in the cost for the KMS. The technical development is largely been done already, so an emphasis is going to be put more on the content development. And on monitoring and evaluation, as I was mentioning earlier, the basis of the monitoring and evaluation framework has been developed, has been already presented to the advisory board, I think, 2 years ago, and the emphasis is going to be this year and going forward in operationalizing it. But we do not believe that this is going to have strong budget implication, as we're going to be able to take advantage of expertise that is present in UN Environment, UNIDO, and is largely going to be performed once this capacity has been built by the staff that is already working in the CTCN. The operational costs have gone slightly. They've slightly decreased. Apologies. I guess that this responds to Matt's point of increasing the efficiency of the CTCN operations. And at the same time, I would like to note that the mandate of the CTCN tends to increase every year, and so there is also need to take care of new requests that parties have made to the CTCN. There is an average PHC line that says it needs to be calculated. This really depends on which sources of funding we're going to be using. There are different level of program support costs that are associated to the different contribution we receive. There are basically 3 main categories. For earmarked contribution in the trust fund, we apply it, or rather, for contribution to the trust fund that require individual reporting, we do apply a 13% program support cost. For those contribution to the trust fund that do not require individual reporting, we do apply a 10% program support cost. And then there are a third category, that is those donors who have special agreement with UN Environment or UNIDO, and have negotiated a lower program support cost rate, given the large amount of funding that they do provide to the organization. So again, the budget is more or less in line with the one that we presented in 2018. If we go to the next slide, Scott, you will see that there is with so-called a high impact scenario that takes in consideration resources that we are hoping to be able to access from the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, and from pro bono support provided by countries. We have estimated this last one at 1 million for 2019. In the case of the GCF and the Adaptation Fund, we estimated it at around 4 million, more or less equally split between GCF readiness proposal that might be approved and Adaptation Fund. Well, there's going to be a presentation on our engagement with Adaptation Fund later today. But if you like to have more information at this moment, I can give the floor to my colleague Jamie that can guide you through what our plan with the Adaptation Fund are. So this would add another 5 million for request implementation. It would increase slightly the resources that would be needed for request coordination, refinement, and support, because as I was mentioning earlier, these interactions are not transaction free, but actually require quite an important effort by the CTCN staff, but also other consultants and consortium partners that we need to engage to provide the technical inputs that are needed for then the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund to evaluate and release the funds. Happy to respond to any question, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Manfredi. So this presentation is always highlight of each autumn advisory board meeting. And before opening the floor, I just remind you of the tasks that we have at hand in the next about 90 minutes is to discuss, to give feedback, to see what kind of further work is needed on the document to be able to approve the plan and to endorse the budget that is presented here. So with this opening words, I would just like to invite the advisory board members for reactions and comments on the outline document. Thank you, Spencer, for being the first.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure how you're asking us to proceed, but I have some comments on the document. And I also have a question which I wanted to ask specifically to Manfredi on the issue of the program support costs. I believe that the way it's explained, if I understand it well, we will never be able to budget for program support costs until after the fact. And that's not the way we should do it. So maybe we may have to put a ceiling on the program support costs of a certain percentage, fixed, and then we see what happens after in actual outcome, because to apply 12, 10, 8, whatever percentage based on different scenarios, we will not know what the scenario will be. So maybe we can agree on a percentage max on the program support costs, and then we see what happens. But that's just a point. I want to find out how you want us to proceed through this document, which is annual operating plan. You want to receive comments on the plan, and in what way you want to go the whole plan and section by section. But okay, you see, my thinking here is that we have task forces, and maybe some of those things should have been already discussed at length in the task forces, and at least come to some form so that we don't spend too much time here in this room on this. So I'm in your hands as to I could give you some comments which I have on this document. So can I continue? The first point here, I believe that the document is way in favor of mitigation and needs to take in also considerations of technology for adaptation. So that's one point. When you look at some of the paragraphs, paragraph 2 especially, and some of those. The second comment has to do with the engagement of the private sector. And we see a very strong priority, or maybe it seems as though it is the priority for financing of the CTCN from private sector resources. If that is not the case, I think we could look at how the wording is in the document to fix this. The other point here is we speak about the different reviews, and it says in the document that this document has benefited from the UNFCCC review and included other donor reviews, but we heard yesterday that we did not have sight of some of those other donor reviews. So I would like to know what specific donor reviews were used to inform this document. The document speaks specifically on the transparency of CTCN funding arrangements will be strengthened and communication impacts will be enhanced. But I think we need to find out how this is going to be done based on the discussion that we have already. It speaks a lot about regional teams. Well, I think we had a discussion on that, and I guess Manfredi explained it with the geographic situation. Again, several places in the document we talk about investments from the private sector remains a priority. So we need to clarify this. It speaks to the CTCN doing outreach in national media. Some form, I don't know how CTCN will outreach to the national media, so that might need a little clarification. I feel, well, I could continue, but I believe, I'm not quite sure if that is the best way to use our time, but these are some of the comments I will have on the document. Maybe I could stop here and then come back.
Of course, it's just about getting some first reactions and seeing how we address the bigger issues that might emerge from different advisory board members and how we can bring them into the document we have at hand. Oli?
Thank you, and thank you, Manfredi, for the very helpful presentation. I have a couple of comments and questions. The first is I'm interested to hear a little bit more about this platform for dialogue with funding partners that's mentioned in paragraph 21. So it sounds interesting. I'd just like to hear a little bit more about that. The second comment is when you talk about enhanced collaboration between the technology and financial mechanisms, or strengthened collaboration, when I read the rest of the paragraph, I'm not quite sure what's going to be enhanced or strengthened. It sounds more like continued collaboration. So I'd just like to know if you can provide some examples of real change that might happen or something that'll make the collaboration stronger and over and above the status quo. And two more points. Under all the activities by priority area, are there any specific activities that these lists are quite comprehensive, and clearly we know that the CTCN has a lot of work on its plate with limited resources. I'm wondering if you can comment a little bit on what activities you think are maybe most at risk of you not being able to address. What are you most worried about? And perhaps what are the most essential that you know you need to tackle? Finally, I would just like to support my colleagues' comments about it would be helpful to see more references to the private sector linkages throughout the document, given that it's a strong theme throughout, but it could use a few more examples and elaboration on how that will be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Oli. Samuel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also want to thank our colleague for his detailed presentation. Maybe I'm missing something from what has been presented because I haven't been able to see exactly the line that is talking about how much of the money, how much of the budget is going to, for supporting, the projects that are going to be submitted for implementation, or that are going to be submitted for approval, then subsequent implementation. Maybe I need to be clear about this. Then, my second question is, yes, this is a high impact budget and also ambitious, but I'm still yet to be convinced of the sources of funding this high impact budget, given the present situation of lack of fund. So I would like to ask the Secretariat how we're going to mobilize resources for funding this 2019 budget. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll just take more, and then we see what are the main issues, and if you allow Ian, you would be the first in the second block of questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Manfredi, for the presentation. And thank you for this proposal for annual operating plan. It's very interesting to read. And I think to begin with a general comment, 2019 will be a very important year. Countries will submit their NDC number 2 in 2020 and the first long-term strategy in 2020. So I wonder somehow in this document if we could highlight the importance of this year and the role of CTCN in terms of contributing to bring in the importance and potential of climate technologies for the implementation of NDCs and long-term strategies, and in a way supporting countries to improve their markets for climate technologies and enabling technology transfer. So regarding the structure of the document, I think it would help to clarify a little bit to answer the question, what should be done and how should it be done? And as it is now, I think it's a little bit mixed, and I wonder if we could begin with what should be done before going into the levels of engagement, which is more about how it could be done. And to begin with, I think it would be good to state the mission or vision of the CTCN as it's clear, or as we have it on the website, which is to stimulate technology cooperation and enhance the development and transfer of technologies to developing country parties at their request. And then I wonder regarding objectives for 2019, would it be possible to distinguish a few objectives based on the theory of change, the program of work, and all the activities mentioned in the annual operating plan? Could we highlight maybe 3 to 5 clear objectives for 2019? And just reading this and listening and participating here in all our discussion, it seems like there are a few areas which could be prioritized in the objectives. So the first area would be to finish the existing line of TA requests. And it seems like that's something that is planned to be done in 2019, which is great. And the second area, which seems very urgent, is to communicate the results and the service of CTCN to relevant stakeholders. And the third area would be on capacity building to receive technical assistance requests with some kind of transformative impact, which are relevant for the implementation of NDCs and national adaptation plans and long-term strategies from 2020 onwards. So I see those 3 areas could be a priority for 2019, and I see you touch upon all those areas in the annual operating plan, but if it would be possible to make it more into clear objectives. And then it goes more into how this would be done and the description of the levels of engagement on the national, regional, and global level, which are all good, but I think it focuses very much on how. And then regarding the activities under the priority areas, as already mentioned, it's very long lists and comprehensive and a lot of activities. So if it would be possible to cluster some of these. And also, I wonder about the feasibility of some of them. So just an example, the third activity under technical assistance is that CTCN supports the preparation of climate technology business plans and roadmaps. And I just wonder about the business plans, if you could elaborate a little bit on that, what that would mean, and if it's feasible, and for who. And also regarding the technical assistance, could we specify a little bit more about how the network will be involved in this area? And again, under section B on the strengthening networks, partnerships and capacity building, again there, how will the network of the CTCN be involved? And then a question regarding the outputs for 2019 on technical assistance. It's very ambitious and good, and you mentioned 25 to 35 TA requests under implementation and concluded. And I think this shows a strong focus on trying to answer all the existing TA requests, which is really good. But is this feasible, do you think? And also, I wonder on the fast technical assistance, 25 to 40 under implementation or no, implemented. Is this existing TA requests that you will make into fast technical assistance, or is it new incoming requests? Just a clarification there. And then regarding the budget, again reflecting this focus on answering the TA requests, I think it's very good that this budget is increased for 2019. And just a question there could be, how many of these requests do you expect to be answered by the members of the network? If we could add some information on that. And one thing just for clarification, and sorry for taking so much time, but in the 2019 budget, it says that we will use around $5 million for the TA requests. And regarding the paper on the impacts of the first 40 TA requests, it was stated that in total CTCN used $5 million for all of those 40 requests. And just if you have some comments on the proportions there, is it that the first years of operation of the CTCN has focused more on building up the organization and spending more in other areas and capacity building, and now that the organization is more mature and in place and we have the capacity to focus more on answering the TA requests, and that's why we can spend equal amount as on the first 40. So just if you can elaborate a bit on that. And then my last point is, I think it's very good that you put increased emphasis on improved communication. I think already the communication and the website, and it's good, but of course things can always get better. And we should really explore and take the opportunities with the digitalization to spread the information about CTCN services and success stories, and so very good with more focus on the digital communication, and that's indeed also a way of building capacity and making CTCN more known. Thanks.
Thank you, Mo. I think we definitely have to stop to take more comments now because there's quite a lot of issues that have been raised in the first three interventions already. Before giving the floor to the Secretary, I just try to capture the different points that have been raised and also how we should respond to them, because some issues, for instance, on the project support cost or the issue about the 5 million for the technical assistance might be more quick reaction, but other questions, particularly more coming back to your point, are more of the structure, how to present this operating plan. I think if I understood that you and some of the others suggested a more clearer presentation of the operating plan with more clearer objectives to what is priority in 2019. So that maybe there's some ideas how we can capture this, and also because now we read the operating plan for 2019 very much in combination with the program of work for the 4 years. I understand that it would be helpful if we would see this as a standalone document, which we are asked to endorse here, so that, that the objectives, the strategic development of the CTCN get clear out of this program, to see how we can uncouple these two elements so that we have a speaking annual operating plan and budget. I think some comments we can maybe cluster. I think Spencer and some others talked a bit about the private sector element, and we had the balance between mitigation and adaptation. Another theme that we can maybe discuss separate is how we work with donors. I think also resource mobilization is a thing that has an impact on the different elements, and how to work with technical assistance, and how this is feedback into the long-term strategies and the NDCs of countries. So just to cluster the discussion a bit. So with, Yuka, would you be ready to take some of the questions already? And maybe first starting to speak on the structure of the report, what we could enhance there, and then going through the different items.
Maybe I start, and Manfredi definitely will help me. Yes, indeed, when we were drafting these two documents, plan of work and then annual operating plan, we maybe tried to kind of cut the corners a bit. That means that we tried to make this annual operating plan a bit shorter than earlier, shorter than normal, which we have had for earlier years, in order to reflect the plan of work, where would have been a lot of that, what you have asking about, mission and vision, theory of change, actually these are the ones. Of course, we can bring back the COP decisions on that. I mean, the COP has made a CTCN a mission, so it's already established. We have also had our vision document, which was introduced to you last spring. So we have that document also there in the back pocket. We can take into annual operating plan that kind of objectives. You are right, Moa, that there are a lot of this kind of menu of options, almost like a lot of individual activities, which some of them might be difficult to implement, some of them are much more easier, and you might look at the priorities, or clustering them or prioritizing them. So that's definitely something we are happy to see the guidance on. Just answering a few of things here. The project support costs are indeed a kind of pretty tricky issue, and definitely if you want to have a maximum, there is a UN common line that we have adopted in the 5th Committee of the United Nations, is the 13%. So that UN agencies are not asking for more for project support costs. But then, indeed, what is the lower level? It's much more difficult, because individual governments and donors are exactly negotiating those. And sometimes we agreed on some figure, something, and sometimes less, and so on. The private sector issue, let me be frank to you, it has been important issue for us for the beginning, but extremely challenging. How to get private sector engaged with the CTCN. We are a convention body which are working with governments and through the governments, and trying to reach private sector through the national designated entities. They choose and they select the key technology needs for us. Sometimes they are totally kind of public needs, laws, regulations. Sometimes, indeed, they reflect the needs of private sector. And that means that somewhere there, for example, we have made, for example, a blueprint or pre-feasibility study for businesses, that creating a business in solar panel production, for example. Or indeed, we have been engaged in coaching private sector, let's say, market creations on some entrepreneurs. So that is something we would really like to do if the governments would hand over that kind of request to us. But it is the question that what is the relationship between the government, national designated entities on technology and their private sector. That means the private sector in those countries who should be instrumental in creating those markets there for new technologies or enhanced technologies. So it is pretty much that how do we get these closer. And a couple of years we have tried to make available the kind of governments to meet the businesses. We have organized these meetings. They are not easy to organize and they are expensive, but we thought that would bring them together, and that means to bring us more business-oriented technical assistance requests for transformational change in the markets. Not all of them have come, not everything has happened, but something has happened. And we have referred a couple of times, for example, changing the markets of electric appliances in Southern Africa, for example. This is about business, because it is the suppliers of these appliances who wish to get into the markets, and it is about the electricity utility companies who are providing electricity who need better appliances in those regions. So somewhere there we have success stories, some of them there are still a lot of challenges on that one. There is about exactly prioritization. Maybe if you read the introduction as well as the kind of their objectives should be there. Maybe there are too many objectives and too many activities. We tried to lay out a full kind of phase of activities which we picked up from those documents. There was a question of that which documents we referred to, Spencer, and yes, indeed, we talked about it, that there are some reviews have been done on CTCN efficiency and deliverables by some donor governments, and as we try to make them public as possible. But some of the guidance was very good, and we took it as a secretary responsibility. And if you don't kind of agree on them or those activities, you are totally free of changing them and modifying. I mean that we should not kind of vest the responsibility of some documents. The secretary takes full responsibility of this paper and so on. Indeed, this 5 million, as you see that we have looked at that for $5 million, which is the biggest sum in the budget, we are exactly trying to do the basic work which CTCN has established to do. It is technical assistance to developing countries. And this is mainly done through the network. So if you asked about network, yes, indeed, we have said it. The COP decision is like this, that the CTC, that means our center, I mean its director mainly, can decide whether to use the technical assistance resources from host agencies as well as consortium, or whether to use network. So there is a kind of flexibility there by the parties have given. But also from the paragraph, if you see, there is an evidence that we should use network efficiently, and we have talked about. That's why majority of the technical assistance are going to the network, because then we get the international bidding. We get the kind of best value for money in a normal UN procurement system. So we use it. When we talked about in the output targets, we have about 30 under design, 30 under implementation, and 30 will be concluded. So we talk about indeed about maybe 100 interactions with governments on technical assistance. And we think that we can do it with $5 million. I mean that, but every case is different. It is we can't have a modified one size fits all, because one interaction might indeed only need $20,000 or $20,000 in order to clarify to that government the way forward. But one is technical assistance request can be so well defined already and well that we need, and it's a big country with a big need. So in a way, 200,000 is still a moderate input, and then we have to put that money in so that we can get some high quality technical assistance, like a hydrodynamic model or a coastal zone management system or plan. So they are very different, and that's why we talk about averages. But we think that we can serve that number of output targets with that number of money. Then someone asked about high impact projects. Indeed, this is the new story. That means that we already have started this path of attracting and using the Green Climate Fund readiness financing. And we have a record of already over, I think that $1 million being this year for 5 projects. And indeed, we are looking at the similar kind of increasing engagement with the readiness financing. And therefore, we trust that a couple of $1 million worth of technical assistance, maybe 1.5 million or so, would be there. Then let me tell you that we have a serious attempt trying to collaborate with Adaptation Fund, which has laid out a call for proposal of a new kind of micro-innovation mechanism, which if we are the ones who've been selected, it's a sizable amount of work. And that will bring within our realms a lot of work for innovative adaptation technology issues and so on. But this is not sure. It is here as a kind of reflection that we are serious about trying to engage other funds. And then indeed we are still relying on those pro bono sources which we have already been tested well, where the customers have been satisfied on that kind of work, and we would try to continue. So that's why we talk about these high impact projects and with some confidence that 5 million extra activities. But this is not guaranteed. Let me tell, this is not that this is contracted or guaranteed. It's different than what we are talking about the core budget. Manfred, do you?
Sorry, I'm still trying to chair this session. Manfred, before I give you the floor to respond and also to tell us how you can incorporate the guidance provided by advisory board members and UCA's reaction into a new version of the document that would be able to endorse at this meeting, I would give the floor to Mark to briefly give some comments.
Yeah, I have over the years, I think, become somewhat of a lowercase expert, so lowercase e expert in explaining program support costs. So, Spencer, directly to your question, the program support cost is best thought of as a indirect overhead charge applied that covers the costs of activities and functions that cannot be directly attributed to a project or a program like the CTCN. So examples would be the legal services, the audit, treasury functions, accounting, human resources. We're going to hire a new director. The HR department will be involved. They won't not charge us for it because their operations are covered, in this case, by the program support cost in aggregate in the organization. And the purpose, and this is a General Assembly determination, that the rate should be sufficient to ensure that all those indirect costs are sufficiently covered in the aggregate. And the intention is to prevent a sort of subsidy being provided by the regular budget, or in the case of UN Environment, the Environment Fund. So governments, your governments, and for many of you, have decided that there should be accountability and transparency and no cross-subsidization from other sources of income. Therefore, the rate determined by the General Assembly, 13%. However, authority is given to the executive director of UN Environment to accept a lower rate if a credible case can be made that there is no subsidy. And that is the case with the trust fund that we established for the CTCN, because the money goes into the trust fund, let's say the indirect costs associated with that are lower, and so the PSC is lower. The program support cost is lower. I believe, and I can't give you, but I could find the number, the European Commission has been a long-term, high, substantial donor to not only the CTCN, but a whole range of environmental programs. As a consequence, they negotiated a lower program support cost with the executive director, Achim Steiner, at the time. So it's really not up to us. And Spencer, I think we could give you a more definitive figure, but in the end, it's a little bit like saying, where does the money flow? In which way does it come, and which program support cost will be assigned to it? I have, on good authority, Matt is going to rally the Ringo forces and provide a $20 million contribution to the CTCN. Not really. But if it went into the trust fund, it would have a lower PSC. If it went into, if Matt and the Ringos decided that had to have specific reporting and it was in its own account and such, it would be the 13%. And of course, that was just to put Matt on the spot a little bit and make sure he's going to be polite when he asks a question.
Spencer, you have another question related to Mark, or can we address this offline to clarify this? Up to you to decide. Okay. Manfredi, now I would like to put you in the spotlight to see how we can improve the document we have in the table.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm not sure I'm in the best position to respond to this question. Maybe this is more for the director to respond. I have a few other things that I'd like to respond that question that were asked. On the national adaptation plans, Spencer, I think is a very good reminder for us to include it in that paragraph. Sorry for not having done that already. On the investment of the private sector, just to complement what Jukka was saying earlier, this has been something that came out pretty forcefully in the review by the NIDA, but also, if I'm not mistaken, in the review done by Ernst & Young on behalf of the parties. Strengthen collaboration with GCF, responding to the question from Canada. We're putting an emphasis mainly at the two levels. One is the national level. We're going to go a little bit more in detail later in the presentation with the GCF, on the GCF that I'll give, and then Andrea from the Secretariat of the GCF will be giving. But just to give you a preview, in the readiness framework, there are new outputs that are technology related, including one on collaboration between the NDAs and the NDEs, so the different focal point of the two mechanisms, and so we believe that level of engagement is the one in which we need to strengthen the collaboration with the GCF. Is not secretariat to secretariat necessarily, but also on the global level, we hope there is going to be opportunities, for example, for a higher level engagement in the regional fora that both organizations organize, and more visibility that is given to the CTCN and to the GCF in the meeting that the other organizes. Samuel, you were asking, if I'm not mistaken, how much fund will be going to the technical assistance functions, and that is, the 4.46 or almost 4.5 million for 2019, excluding the resources that we might be able to access from the adaptation fund and the Green Climate Fund and the pro bono. On the Swedish point on NDC, the second tranche of NDCs and long-term strategies, I think is an excellent idea once again to include it in the AOP. I think we should look at the activities by priority areas as we were describing. The CTCN remains a country-driven mechanism, and so we are certainly happy to help countries in assisting them in implementing their NDC, but also in raising the ambition of their NDC. So I think that the activities that are listed here are more of areas out of the large menu of options that countries, out of the large menu of things that the countries can ask us. These are the areas that we think have more, that should be prioritized by the countries, and we think it makes sense to include them in this way so that they have a stronger emphasis than others in terms of the larger services that we could provide to the countries. On the other end, I mean, you were asking, I think it was Canada actually, which are more at risk. Those who are more dependent from outside than the CTCN, right? So the technical assistants need to come to us, and then they need to make sense, and engagement with the Green Climate Fund and the other mechanism under the convention and the donors needs to be it's a bilateral work, and so we can try to do it, but also there needs to be interest on the other side in doing so. On the vision, as Yuka was mentioning, we had discussed at the March meeting a vision document that I don't think was endorsed eventually by the advisory board. But so the three pieces in our mind should be linked to each other. So there is a long-term vision that is defined by this vision. There is a program of work that defines it for the 3-4 years after, and then it gets further specified by the annual operating plan. To our recollection of the COP decisions, there are these are things that documents, outputs that the advisory board has to endorse. We're obviously in your hands if you think that some shouldn't be done or approved, or on maybe the last element to respond to what Spencer was saying earlier of the engagement of the task force. A plea, I guess, on my side, it makes our life a little easier if we could have this sort of engagement at an earlier stage, so that we do not that we have particular plans for tonight, so that we cannot work on the annual operating plan. Happy to do so, but it gives us time to go through these things in more detail and more calm, and being able to better respond to your request. And yeah, and Federico has an answer on the FTA, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Manfredi. There was also a question about the number of FTAs that we plan for next year. That number is a combination of both. We have also still ideas of trying to bundle them and also work with other entities, even to help us to foster new opportunities for FASTA. But we still have, as also presented within the graph, a lot of requests. And the exercise that we are doing now is also to clean our portfolios, especially for all the requests. So discussing with the country if these are still priorities for them. Otherwise, we're asking NDs to withdraw them and talk about future. So this was also the exercise we have done both in Africa and in Latin America during this year, during the two regional fora. And so for the FTA, it's a combination of partly cleaning what we have in our record already and produce new. And also in terms of, business plans, probably that was our tentative. It is our tentative to engage more with the private sector. So through ATA, we can also aim at producing business plans. No, ATA can produce this, so such a plan that help private sector then stepping in, thanks to preparing the market for for a subsequent intervention by private sector companies thanks to our work. Probably that could have been more elaborated. So, but that's the idea. It's also in light of trying to get finally more engagement with the private sector, which was something that we have really a bit struggled. But so this is again something being a priority for next year. Thank you.
Thank you for this further clarification on different items. And we have 4 speakers now on the list. We would start with Ian, Claudia, Matthew, and then last one is Julian. And then I think then we break to give the Secretary a chance to react. But Ian, you're first.
Thank you, and thanks for the work on the AOP. I think it's a very good document, and I appreciate the brevity in this version. It's very clear and concise. I think a couple of general points and then a few specific ones. Need to bear in mind that we need to give you some direction for continuing working, but also bearing in mind that we are planning to discuss a program of work for the next 4 years, which presumably would have some bearing on our annual operating plan for the next year. So in some sense, the AOP should be driven by the program of work, but here we're talking about the AOP first, so I'm not sure which comes first, but there may need to be some flexibility in how we finalize those. But in any case, a few specific points. I agree with Spencer and Orly about the private sector linkages. I think that's a very important area, and that's already brought out in a few places, like in the communications part in B4. It's good to see we're targeting private sector audiences some more. I think outreach and engagement there is important. And not wanting to repeat what everyone said, but I agreed with many of Mo's points, and especially on technical assistance. More information about how the network is being involved would be very, very helpful. It's also very good to see the emphasis on fast technical assistance and multi-country activities. I think those are important ways forward for the CTCN and add to the kind of armory of ways of providing assistance which are most appropriate to NDE requests. And I think they're very good tools to have. In terms of developing partnerships with others, the financial mechanism, MDBs, regional development banks, as well as others working in the space, definitely helpful to hear that written here, the CTCN plans to engage with bilateral and multilateral funding agencies. It's good to see here, but I'd be interested to have more information in the report about who and how and what the plans are, and a bit more in terms of a strong commitment to partnering with others. There's also a kind of subgroup working on somewhat smaller scales, but groups such as the Private Finance Advisory Network, the Low Emissions Development Strategies Group, the NDC Compact, initiatives under the Clean Energy Ministerial, for instance, where I think we need to be more explicit in showing our interest in partnering through the AOP, and we're really kind of showing that we're working in this space with others and trying to provide climate technology assistance. I think it was cast in on a good idea on the budget narrative. I think that would be very helpful. Also heard, I think maybe it was Spencer, about using task forces to develop work on the AOP. I think we definitely benefit from having more intersessional work and discussions on the program of work, as well as budget issues in between the AB sessions. And just finally, as well, the slides were very helpful, and I wonder if it would be possible for all of the slides to be shared with board members if that's not already being done. Thanks.
Thank you, Ian. I would now give the floor to Claudia.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you very much, Manfredi and the team for preparing this document. I agree it's a very good document for our discussions and for providing some advice on how to improve it. I definitely agree with the need to balance adaptation and mitigation throughout the document. Paragraph 2 is one example of that, but we should probably have a read again on the need, on where is needed to add adaptation. Also, there are some comments regarding some concepts that are included in the document today. For example, when we say the CTCN will support broader national planning and budgeting processes, I think this is going beyond what the CTCN can do, since national budgeting processes are nationally determined and there's no influence of the CTCN on that process. I also had the question on catalyzing large investments in climate technologies through bankable technology projects. Might be also a little bit, I understand the idea is to try to catalyze them, but it might be good to revise a little bit that paragraph so that we don't misunderstand what is the actual capacity of the CTCN to do that. I had a question also on the national media issue, especially given budget constraints. And I think this could be important, a good activity to try to probably raise funds for if needed, but I know there are budget constraints and personnel constraints, so that it would be very expensive, I think. There is this concept also on climate technologies taxonomy, which is a little bit vague. And then technology innovation cycle at all stages of the technology innovation cycle. So I think we were referring to the technology cycle, not only the innovation section there. Then on paragraph 13, we have a quote on the UN Agenda 2030. I was just thinking it's probably better to stick with the Paris Agreement or Convention language. Not that I don't like the quote, it's just that I think it's good to stick to the mandate of and we have similar language for that in the Convention. So again, on the geographic versus regional versus multi-country, I just wanted to clarify that I'm okay with having any word as long as we have separate reporting for all different regions of the UNFCCC. In particular, not to have Latin America and the Caribbean sum up with Africa. So as long as the reporting is done like that, I think whatever word reflects better the operations of the CTCN is fine to have in the annual operating report. But having said that, there is some regional word in there that came from the previous version, so I think it's good to revise in any case so that we don't have two words referring to the same thing. Paragraph 18, I agree with Orly that it would be good to have some more elaboration on what is exactly going to be done to reflect the strengthening of the linkage between the technology and the financial mechanism and not just business as usual operations. I think this is very important, and some more ideas on how to do that I think we appreciated by parties and especially by parties in the AV in terms of the work to be done next year on this. Then I wasn't sure when we say establishing clear, so this is paragraph 21, establishing clear annual targets for resource mobilization. If this is the case, then we'll have this target here for 2019, or what do we want to have for that here. And we have also on the next activities on their priority areas to be undertaken, technical assistance. We have the CTCN produces this and this and this and this. I think we should be careful about what is to be done by the CTCN and what is party output. So parties will do their investment proposals, not the CTCN. So I think it's, and that's something that is happening in all that section. So what is done by the CTCN, what is done by NDEs, what is done by countries as they implement their NDCs, and not to mix them. There is this mentioning of an online gender hub. So I was wondering if that is a new activity or if that's also something that it's part of a new activity to be undertaken by the CTCN. And of course the resource implications, just to be clear on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. On my list, I have Matthew as next speaker.
Thanks for the opportunity to come in. It's a very interesting document. What I struggle with a little is trying to understand what are the activities rather than going forward, what are the activities, the new ones versus the old ones, and how we prioritize them, and even aligning areas that seem to be new priority areas are renewed, as in the case of the private sector, without actually any increase in budget associated with that area. So if I can just touch on a few points really. The first one is the activities by priority section 3. It doesn't seem to be future activities or activities within 2019, just in terms of the language. It's like a list of, this is what we do. And then it's certainly not by priority because it just includes everything. So I think prioritization requires, being more specific in terms of the endeavor, in terms of what the remit is of the CTCN, and using the budget to align the priority areas is important. In response to Mark's comment, yeah, it would be great to get the research entities to provide 20 million. Yeah, no problem. It just reminds me that the research entities, of course, are kind of cash poor, but intellectually rich, right? So, but they're all members, a lot of them are members of the consortium. I'm just thinking of TERI, NRAIL, ECN, ECIR, AIT, DTU, they're all, so that abundance of knowledge exists within the consortium, and there's no reference to them really in the document about how you would engage with, and they've collectively thousands of staff that you could rely on in terms of bringing excellence in terms of research endeavor and knowledge into the work of the CTCN. The area that I want to focus on a little is the strengthening networks and partnership. And I think that a lot of focus, be it rightly or wrongly, is on engagement with entities inside the convention, not necessarily those that really require the engagement, which is those that are outside the convention. I think maybe a different type of framing is important here. No, I understand the focus, I guess, in multilateral. Of course, the NDEs are important. The private sector, I wish my bingo representative was here, but of course, as a Ringo, like research and industry collectively collaborate all the time. So having the private sector engagement is hugely important. But then I don't see where any budget is assigned to this. I know I really welcome trying to quantify the numbers, but it just doesn't add up in my book unless I'm reading it incorrectly, and I'm looking certainly for guidance. So if I just take 3 different things here, the thematic events, I think somewhere between 4 and 6, I think that's a good idea. The private sector engagement, somewhere between 10 and 12. I'm guessing that those numbers didn't exist in the 2018 it would be nice to reflect back on what was delivered in 2018 to inform 2019. But there's no budget increase for these areas. So from what I can see, stakeholder engagement was 180,000 in 2018. It's 180,000 in 2019. But there's going to be a renewed focus on the private sector. So where is that money coming from for that focus? Or is what has been dropped, more importantly, in terms of stakeholder engagement? The regional forum, of course, we've talked about them yesterday. And I think this is a real opportunity to engage RINGOs and BIGOs and environmental NGOs within these regional fora and enhance the outreach, because a lot of the knowledge exists within the convention, but a lot of that knowledge doesn't exist outside of the convention, and we seem to constantly be targeting within the convention, or the bodies within the convention. My last point then really relates to knowledge management and the vast sum of money being assigned still to knowledge management versus some of the other areas. Content development is the same allocation as stakeholder engagement. That just seems to be disproportionate. That's the technical content. Actually, they've merged both for next year, so it just seems disproportionate. Now, I was trying to listen attentively since the meeting began. I don't think anyone has mentioned the term knowledge management. I know it's important, maybe hidden in terms of digitalization of services, and I get that in terms of the outreach, but it does seem to be disproportionate in finance terms. In terms of the collective groupings, be it the environmental NGOs, the RINGOs, or the BINGOs, the business communities, there is large opportunities here. They're not being tapped into. In terms, when I do a search of this document for research, it exists once, and in terms of case studies, business exists once in terms of case studies. So there are gaps, but certainly it's a welcome document. But I can provide some additional input into it if required. Thanks.
Thank you. I would now, next on my list is Julian, followed by Joseph.
Thank you, Carsten. Thanks, Manfredi, for the presentation and the very clear and well-structured AOP. I just have two minor comments. First, I want to support what Moa has been said about the language reflecting the Paris Agreement. I think it's very important that we highlight this a bit more. Maybe we could do this under paragraph 2 when it comes to the CTCN and providing its services along the technology cycle in order to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, which both covers adaptation and mitigation, instead of mentioning the program of work here, which is yet to be discussed. And we could also add behind national determined contributions and long-term strategies, so that we make sure that both is supported by the CTCN's work. Second comment is on the language of supporting developing country NDEs, which I find a bit strong when you write like national designated entities will be engaged and will be empowered. And also under the targets, we see a target training of CTCN NDEs. I just want to make clear, I fully support the outreach, and the information and the communication, and strengthening and improving the process. But we should also keep in mind that it's the developing countries' NDEs' responsibility to make their NDEs fully functional and operational, and to be able to put up requests. And maybe you can find some language which reflects this also. Thank you.
Thank you. I move from Julian to Joseph now.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Manfredi, for your presentation. I just want to get just 2 clarifications and also have 1 comment. If you look at the
the targets. There's this mention of training of NDEs. I just want to know if there are any other form of training that has been organized for NDEs, or is it just the regional workshops that have been organized in terms of bringing some capacity of NDEs? I just want some clarification on that. The other thing is that under the technical assistance activities, I also see some analysis that has been done in terms of NDCs, NAPs, and the TNAs. I don't know, and this basically is for potential transformation. I don't know if there are any documentation on that maybe we can also look at as to some of this analysis. And the comment I have is basically regarding supporting NDs. I think I must say that basically if you look at let's say the marriage between NDs and the CTCN, it's basically trying to respond to a technical assistance in terms of request. And if you look at the requests that are being submitted, particularly from developing countries, basically, if you look at the way these requests are submitted, is individuals who probably get to know and understand what CTCN can provide for them, and they contact the NDE, and the NDE helps submit this request. But my thinking is that going forward, we can look into trying to support NDEs more and trying to also kind of get some form of discussion with broader stakeholders to be able to understand what CTCN can do and also be able to bring in some streamlined or prioritized request. And this I'm saying because if you look at this, the plan, I'm not seeing anything in terms of how the CTCN is going to do that to support NDEs. I think yesterday this issue came up with how CTCN is going to support NDEs nationally to be able to at least churn out some of these TAs. One thing we have come up and always mention is how does CTCN support NDEs in terms of some operations of what they do to be able to bring in this technical assistance. I know this discussion has been tricky to some level, but I think that if you look at the number of TAs that are coming in, it presupposes that there could be more, but because of that operational part in terms of the CTCN, the NDE being able to stand alone, be able to do some of these activities in country, it sort of limits what comes in through the request channel. So my thinking is that probably we can begin to look at how best, I know there have been some discussion in terms of trying to channel some of this through maybe the technical assistance that are requested, and maybe that discussion can probably go on, or maybe we can look at other ways by which the CTCN can actually come in to support the operations of the NDE to actually make sure that they can also churn out the needed requests to support the countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. I have on my list from the advisory board is Sumia and Oli. I would close the list with these two interventions, but I would also like to open the floor after Sergio's intervention to the observers and network members. So if you want to come in at this stage, please raise your flag and we would give you the floor afterwards. And then we would give the CTCN team the chance to react, and then we discuss the way forward on this item. But Sumia, you would be the next speaker.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually giving up because my flag was up for quite some time, and I actually was thinking that you will not give me a chance. Thanks again. I have first starting with an appreciation, because we have talked about the outreach, and we noticed that outreach has been, in percentage terms, substantially increased from $7.1 to $0.93 million. And we had been discussing, so we think better utilizing the services of the advisory board members, this might even with it, this can be increased much further than envisaged now. But then there are two concerns and questions. One, the operating plan obviously is dependent on the working program of work. Throughout the program of work, it has been mentioned that in the next period, we will be delivering, it will be accelerated, targeted delivery, faster delivery, more deliveries. But if you look at the budget from 4.9 to $5.05 million, this is not reflected. Plus, probably I would have, if I would have been helping in this work, I would have anticipated that after this IPCC's new report, the situation of what kind of technical assistance requests come, how many technical assistance requests will come, will substantially change. Because there are, if you have looked at the climate negotiations and how countries have responded with enthusiasm or disinterest, there is always a peak and a going down. And their peaks are happening during this period. So this is an anticipated event where a lot of countries, particularly poor countries, will come up, and those who are most vulnerable. So that seems to be a little bit absent, these two considerations, that throughout the document you are saying that faster delivery, larger delivery. The second thing, this anticipation seems to be a little bit absent because, of course, repeatedly we are mentioning this, the budgetary constraints we understand. But even that anticipation for the next 4 years probably would be not really reflected. The second concern is, see, the number of the engagements that are being projected, number of thematic events 4 to 6, number of private sector engagement 10 to 12. I would have thought that this probably is a lopsided approach, because whereas it is important to have engagement at private sector, and I'll have a comment on that, very specific comment on that, considering the kind of areas that you are mentioning in your program of action. There are priority areas mentioned, there are other areas which are coming up. I think I would have thought that the thematic areas would have been given a little more importance so that even countries which do not have that kind of technical and scientific expertise will understand that what are the kind of threats that we are facing. It's not always visible on the ground, and what kind of responses are possible. So that is one area that we see as is not being reflected. Plus, see, when we talk about private sector engagement, it's very different from engaging country parties or NDs. Country parties, theoretically, many countries probably don't take it very seriously, but countries or any government bodies are theoretically accountable to the people who are being impacted, in general, the citizens. The private entities are accountable only to the shareholders and the board, and for the profit. So if we are planning large-scale private sector engagement, what are your ground rules? What are your safeguards that these do not end up opening up markets for private companies who have solutions to sell, and they are looking for markets where their ready-made solutions will be sold? And we have seen this enough. If you look at in your priority of work, in the program of action, in the mitigation area, you are proposing mass burns. That turns into incinerator-based waste to energy. Mass burns means that. Yesterday, Yuka also mentioned about geothermal energy in some African countries, I forgot. We have heard about other areas where there are known public health risks. Like if you just look at the kind of impacts this in the low to medium income countries, the incinerator-based waste to energy plants have created, there is huge amount of public health risk because in densely populated cities, these plants have been set up knowing that the developing countries, municipal solid waste don't have that kind of calorific value, knowing that the promoters will burn the polythene, creating dioxin and furan. So I would recommend that, and here I would like to read out from the program of action, page 9.29. As a trusted, technology-neutral partner, the CTCN will utilize resources from the market and engage in interventions and activities in early stages where there is greater risk, providing effective due diligence work. But this effective due diligence work means you do a risk analysis of the technologies that are being peddled. You do a ground rule for what is the minimum acceptance level of a private sector party that is going to come in as a solution provider. That is absent throughout the document, which is a matter of great concern. And this I raised even yesterday at one point. But at this point, because the program of action is being now approved along with the plan, the working plan, budget. So I think these two concerns should be taken into account. First, what is your ground rule for engaging private sector, that these do not end up in creating CTCN creating markets for private sectors who are wanting to sell their ready technologies, whether they are suitable or not. We have enough. If Volkswagen can do this with enough money, with billions of dollars of money, they can fudge their results, then smaller parties will do this. That is known. It's not nothing unusual. We have enough examples. So what are the safeguards, and what is this risk analysis due diligence mechanism that CTCN as a trusted partner, because the trust should not be broken. After we have enough examples. We have in India proposals came, and something like 2 million hectares of areas have been planted with eucalyptus and cherry pine, creating green deserts. So now scientific institution, Center for Degraded Ecosystem Restoration, they are planning how to choke this and replace with indigenous varieties. So we should not end up peddling dangerous technologies, because climate technologies are needed, and the core cardinal principle is risk reduction. Why are we sitting here on all the UNFCCC's gathering together? It's not to make profits for something, not to make some business viable. It's for risk reduction. So entire document, that element, the core principle of climate redressal, the risk reduction for the maximum number of people, that seems to be missing, and that needs to be spruced up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will come back to the points later on. I would continue my list with Orly and Sergio.
Yes, thank you for letting me back in with an additional comment. Just two quick things. First, I really appreciate my colleague Moa's comment on objectives. I think that could be very helpful for the document. And my other comment is, I think it would be helpful to give a sense of progress if there was a way for the target outputs chart, if there was a way to provide a sense of percent increase from last year or maybe a previous year before that. So the targets are helpful, but doesn't provide me a sense, at least, of, well, how much further is this pushing you from last year? What's the level of ambition that these targets represent? Thank you.
Thank you. Sergio?
Thank you. First of all, I would thank Manfredi for his presentation. Well, I share what has been said by, especially by Moa, who highlighted the importance of this plan of action for 2019. That's for the reason that Moa raised, but also because it's the first step of the program of work. In this sense, I share perhaps the perplexities that Ian has raised. And if it would have been better to discuss first the POV and then the AOP or vice versa. But so I would simply state or request, my question is if we have the opportunity to come back to this AOP after the discussion of the PO.
Sorry, can you repeat your last sentence?
Yeah, as this is a very important step, this action operating plan for 2019, and it is very linked to the program of work for the quadriennial period, I would ask if it is possible, after the discussion of PO, to come back to this point and have, in order to have the reaction for that, to include some other points.
Okay, thank you. See no more flags from the advisory board members. That before we go, I see, if I'm looking around, I see one observer asking for the floor. Actually, I see two. If I'm So I would give you the floor now for your intervention. Maybe briefly introduce yourself to the benefit of the advisory members.
Thank you for the floor. My name is Brianna Kraft. I am a researcher with the International Institute for Environment and Development, IIED. IIED works very closely with the least developed countries group in the negotiations. And I just wanted to make a few comments. Last year, we published a paper with the LDC representative to the tech and the CTCN about LDC's experience with the technology mechanism. And from their experiences, I just wanted to say that support to the NDEs and capacity building remain primary concerns of the LDC group. And I would caution removing language on empowering NDEs and furthering capacity building, as this is still their expressed need. So it's good to see mention in the operating plan about the incubator program for LDCs and SIDS, and the target indicator of enrolling 10 new countries in the program. And I would be keen to hear the specific steps that the CTCN plans to take to reach this target, and just to understand from the footnotes on the last draft budget if this is subject to the availability of additional resources. And just to say that TNA requests, or TA requests, coming from LDCs are overwhelmingly public. So I agree with Spencer's comments about the priorities of the operating plan needing to reflect both public and private funding and mobilizing those resources. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Brianna. And Maxime?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, my name is Maxwell Tim. I serve as the NDE for Uganda. I was just following up on the submission from the distinguished delegate from Ghana regarding the training capacity development for the NDE. I think it's very interesting because ultimately the role of the NDE, among other things, to make sure that quality technical assistance is delivered. And in between there, it takes many things, lots of capabilities that should make the NDE ready to do this. Notwithstanding the fact that over the years, we've been highlighting the plight of the NDEs because they're really pretty under-resourced. But going forward, I think in keeping with the spirit to empower the NDEs, I think as we think of the training, I think it's important that the NDEs should be involved to such an extent that it would be nice to kind of do some kind of training needs analysis so that the NDEs can talk about their needs, what they need to be equipped with in order to manage the technical assistance right from delivery, and even then the post-technical assistance activities in terms of developing proposals for purposes of attracting funds from maybe from private sector as well as the GCF. So I think it's important that CTCN works with the NDE so that we kind of avoid doing the same thing over and over. Because I can tell you, as an NDE, I need some knowledge in monitoring and evaluation in terms of managing this technical assistance. You need a sneak peek of what it takes to guide in the developing the proposal that would be delivered maybe to the private sector or to GCF. So I think let's do a bit of business unusual this time in order to increase, to do some kind of value addition as we think about training, because we've done for the last 4 years or so, yes, we've had some training, but I think let's see how we can involve the NDEs so that we address the existing gaps so that we can be able to ultimately deliver on what is expected of the NDE. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maxwell, for the comment, and thank you, observers and advisory board members, for the comments. So before I move, give the floor back to the Secretariat, I think Manfredi outlined that in the end we have a triple jump to do. We have a vision document, we will discuss a program of work, and we have to discuss what are the priorities for 2019. But we also have to make sure that this triple jump is not ending up in a house of cards, because we haven't been able to approve the vision document at the last advisory board meeting. We are also waiting for certain clarity on the technology framework. So what we should aim for is to be able to approve a document guiding the CTCN within its mandate. And we also see, I think we've had several comments, I don't want to go back into the discussion, but some of the activities of NDEs are not necessarily always part of the CTCN, because the NDEs are not exclusively part of the CTCN, they are network members. So we should really see what is possible within the budget that we have available, and see what are the consequences to get an endorsable plan for 2019 at this advisory board meeting, and maybe also take some of the messages that are more further reaching to see how we can improve the work for the future work programs beyond 2019. So maybe working more with the advisory board members or observers in developing future programs of work or the annual operating plan. With these words, I would like to turn to Yuka and to Manfredi to see how we move the discussion forward, and maybe see what your suggestions are for this.
Yeah, I really hope that Manfredi has got all the questions and will answer. But just one general thing is that this is a kind of business as usual. I mean, this is a work program based on our mandate given by the parties in the COP decisions, as well as reflecting a bit of new what we have this year done. But mainly it is what we do. And we have this through delivery sections which we have to carry out as is being decided. If the parties decide something else, then indeed we then can change dramatically what we are doing, and indeed increase the ambition level as much as we have money. So we could go into aggressive campaigning to developing countries of more technical assistance requests, calling specifically something and so on. We have not done it because we have a continuous stream of technical assistance requests still coming in. I think that they are pretty much amount which we can do in the 8 staff people which we have and some consultancies in the management, plus what we have monies for technical assistance as this 5-year level. So in that sense, I don't think that we should expect that this is now some kind of very revolutionary document as such. So in general, just reflect. And as you see that it was, the numbers in the output targets are a bit similar than last year. In a way, you see that but there are changes, and Manfredi can maybe explain that what the changes are and so on that one. The numbers in the budget are a bit same. Yes, indeed, you well noted that development of knowledge management system is over in a kind of sense. That's why we are greatly reducing the development costs of that, and then trying to keep the maintenance and management. Of course, there is always updating resources needed. And so on. So there are some changes in the budget lines on that one. Our main service is technical assistance, and within that budget we want to keep that as a priority, and then the rest is then shared with the other lines of budget as we can take in. But that is exactly debatable. That can be prioritized by advisory board, and that is your prerogative. I will come some, but I might first give to Manfredi to answer specific questions, and then if there is anything, I will come back.
Thank you. Yeah, and I might, if the Vice Chair allows, give also the floor to my colleagues that are working more specifically on some of the topics that were touched by the questions. So relation with PFAN-LED's Clean Energy Ministerial, PFAN is hosted by our co-host UNIDO It's part of the network. We work with them regularly, as we do with LEDs that, as the U.S. representative knows, is hosted by the National Renewable Energy Lab. That is one of our consortium partners. To be honest with you, we might need to increase the collaboration with the SAM. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd be glad to get your suggestions in terms of ideas on what this collaboration could look like, but certainly very open to that. In terms of, there has been many suggestions of organization topics that we should be including in the annual operating plan. It's as you have noticed, this is a very short document that just doesn't have the ambition of being comprehensive in terms of the amount of activities and partnership that will be established. Also because these are in large part driven by requests for technical assistance by countries, and we do not necessarily can anticipate those. We take note of the need to have a better balance between adaptation and mitigation. That was something we can certainly do. On the other side, I think that our track record shows that we do take very much in consideration adaptation technologies. So I hope that this can be taken in consideration and in part excuse our oversight if it doesn't appear to be particularly balanced in this document. What do we mean by catalyzing large investments? I guess we're missing an R, larger investments that the CTCN budget allows. There are some examples. Certainly, we'd like some of the readiness proposal and the technical assistance that we have developed to be directed then will be used as input for larger project proposal that can go, for example, to the Green Climate Fund. There is a couple of examples of activities that have been performed and then have been picked up by multilateral development banks. The one that comes to mind is a work on a feasibility study for a biomass district energy system in Bosnia-Herzegovina. That it was an investment by the CTCN of, I think, $120,000 that generated a $30 million investment by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. This is those cases in which we really show our catalytic ability. Then we can discuss on why this doesn't happen as much as it should. But on the climate technology taxonomy, we have done some work in the previous years in coming up with a taxonomy that is on the CTCN website that kind of defines help categorize the intervention that we're doing. And I think it was presented to the advisory board at previous meetings, and I don't know if it was endorsed, but at least it was, if I'm not mistaken, appreciated by the then members of the advisory board. I'll give the floor later to my colleague Karina for responding on the question on the Gender Hub. The links to the research institutions, once again, I mean, we very much, I mean, as the representative from the Ringo community highlighted, most of our consortium partner are research institutions. It's probably not the best use of space, paper, and time to re-highlight what their capacity are. We believe that one of the reasons why the consortium led by UN Environment was chosen by the parties to manage the CTCN was that there were collaborations with these organizations and the knowledge and experience that they can bring to the CTCN. We do make use of their expertise on a regular basis. They are the one that prepared the response plan to the technical assistances. So again, yeah, we can highlight it, but it is very much embedded in our day-by-day operations. On the training for NDEs. Again, I'll give the floor to Rajiv later for further clarification, but for further analysis. But for example, we have piloted in 2018 this vision to concept model that we have presented to you, I think, at some point. So to help countries move from their vision for bankable proposal to actual concept that can be submitted to the Green Climate Fund, for example. This is done for NDEs as well as other beneficiary parties, and this is one of the examples. There are others. On the which should, well, I don't know if I'm well placed to discuss whether we should discuss first the program of work and then the annual operating plan. I would agree that it would make more sense to discuss first the program of work, but you know, I leave it to the wisdom of the advisory board. On the support to national designated entities, this is an ongoing struggle, and there are certainly two tensions. The developing country would like to have more assistance. Developed country are more cautious. Let's put it this way. We hope. Well, we were trying to strike a balance between these two positions. I don't. Maybe we managed to annoy both of you, but this certainly wasn't the intention. There was a question on the analysis of the national designated entity, the national determined contribution, the other planning documents. There are examples. Some of these documents are for the moment internal. Some others have already been made public. For example, there was one that was performed by a network member for the activities for countries in Asia and in the Pacific that has been presented at the regional forum in Korea, and same has been done for the other region. I am just told, and I don't know if we should stop now or I should give the floor to my colleagues for the other clarification. Maybe not, and then we can take the others bilaterally. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for this overview. Yuka, you want to explain the process towards Friday?
Yeah, there have been very good notions and remarks and proposals. Of course, they were not textual, and they were not. We didn't. I hope that we catched most of them. Some of them are those which we should actually change the draft for you. So I would just say that we would work on a new draft based on this discussion. There are some contentious issues where there is a division between the members. So in that sense, we can highlight that these paragraphs may be something you need to discuss and agree among yourselves. For some, we can keep some extra explanation and come back to you on that one. So, for example, I can come back to you. Definitely, there is one mistake in the plan of work, by the way. There is this one which you referred that there is a kind of indications that we have mass burning or incineration of solid waste. It was not our list. It was actually the list of high-level champions of the TEM process, which was taken by mistake. So we correct that one. Our own list is different of mitigation, let's say successful mitigation technical assistance. So we'll correct that one. And indeed, the due diligence issue is a lengthy debate. We have to have it, but at least we have recorded it in our text, for example. But I just said that we come back with the revised version and trying to take upon board what you have said, and then we could have next time we as a secretary wish that then comes the real textual proposals. If you want to add something or you want to delete or you change, then we can get them.
Thank you, Yuka. So with this, we park this item. We get back to this tomorrow. You see that I'm equipped with lunch, so we can also continue. But what I would suggest now, before we move into the cooperation with the colleagues from the financial mechanism, is that we break for a quick lunch. We have a video link established after lunch, so what I suggest is that we are back at 2:15. It should give us enough time to go to the canteen, to have a quick lunch, and to be back here so we can start on time at shortly after 2:15 with a presentation. I think we start with Standing Committee on Finance, and then we have the GCF and the GEF present in the room. This would be the proposal, and now I wish you a good lunch break.